Hi everyone, it's been a while. Yeah, I know, that's kind of my bad. I decided that long videos weren't a thing I could do right now, seeing as I'm absolutely fucking swamped with school. And this is a lot of work to do on its own, so I've put this on the back burner. So we're coming back with a script that I've already written. I've had this one for about like a month or two, but that's whatever, besides the point. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, you know what the video is, so let's just get to that. The two guys behind the project, as well as that band as a whole, Dan Barrett and Tim McCouga, made it pretty clear in most every interview that this wasn't meant to be a big commercial release. They didn't advertise, they didn't go out of their way to make it known to the public. It was just a couple of guys with some instruments in an apartment, and here we are. Just when I thought I had done everything flawlessly, I accidentally deleted a clip that was super important to the entire album. There is a 70-page booklet companion to the album that details the life of a fictional version of a real person, Antiochus, who was a Greek philosopher from the 2nd century, I think. The booklet details part of his life as well as the religion that then is started based off of him, known as the Antiochans, the group at least, who worship this thing known as the Great Negation, the eventual death of the universe and all things within it. They think that death is easier to accomplish than life, and this is a massive part of the entire album. I talk about it at length. I don't know how I deleted that clip. I'm an idiot. Laugh at me in the comments. The album is a mix of experimental, ambient, shoegaze, post-punk, and drone, all coming together to make this dark, depressing, almost disturbing album that has themes from a wide variety of topics such as time travel, religious fervor, death, and how we should all think of it. So let's get to it. Another aside before we get into things is the fact that the album uses a famous painting, The Death of Marat, as its album cover. The painting is a representation of Jean-Paul Marat, a French revolutionary who was murdered in his bathtub that he was confined to due to illness by someone who was most definitely in favor of the monarchy at the time. It's most likely to represent the conflict between progressive ideals and things such as nation states or religion, but we'll get to that when it's important. For now, we can start with the music. The opening track, A Quick One Before the Eternal Worm Devours Connecticut, is a nearly 8-minute instrumental to introduce the sound and aesthetic of this album, which means that it sounds very dark and gloomy. This is also part one of the two sides to the album. I don't know how else you describe it. This is titled The Plow That Broke the Plains. It's up to interpretation what that exactly means, but we'll get back to it later when we have a bit more context from the other tracks. The only lyrics on this track are repeated lines, sometimes I don't know, which helps the gloomy and eerie feeling settle in. This is also compounded by the repeating synths and guitar section, which helps that feeling sink in and prepares you for what's about to come next. The second track and first proper song, Blood Hail, is where we see a lot of the concepts and ideas of the album come into being. Not only this, but the instrumentation continues to provide that gloomy, dark atmosphere with muddy drums and even a muddier bass in the beginning, only to give way to an electric guitar that sounds like it's fucking dying on this laptop quality mic. It helps the entire atmosphere grow, and the lyrics only get more into it, so let's get into those. Lines like, and our clothes are all too often ripped, and our teeth are all too often gnashed, and it lasts as long as it possibly can, are meant to describe the life and story of the Antiochans, those who followed Antiochus and believed that death was easier to achieve than life. In the booklet, it describes how these people were not only tortured and beaten, but genuinely persecuted by the fictional Roman Empire, which leads to the following events of the track. Now, if everything up to this point sounds really metaphysical and kind of insane, I'm sorry, it's not gonna get easier. If anything, it just continues down this rabbit hole. So this is my warning of like, if this sounds like too much, just this is your chance. The lines, faces sweaty, arms and legs, what a glorious set of stairs we make, is not meant to be taken metaphorically. This is quite literally what's happening. The Antiochans are forming a human staircase to ascend to the heavens. Why you would need to ascend to the heavens on a human staircase? Well, this song provides a reasonable answer. It's to kill God. This is not a metaphorical interpretation. This is quite literally what it says in the booklet. They kill God here. This is just definitive, factual. This is the plot. The following, we kill everyone with arrowheads, 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 is quite literally them shooting arrows at God and just hoping they hit him. They kill everyone because they're just shooting arrows into the fucking sky. What do you expect to happen? However, it works with the line, thank God that's over, as if they're just kind of brushing it off. They don't really give a shit anymore. Now, if it wasn't clear already, the Antiochans are supposed to be a sect of Christians, because remember, in the early days of Christianity, there was a lot of weird shit going on. Gnosticism, for example, believed that the God that most Christians worshipped was actually a fake deity created by another one who left the true God, that is, a divine nothing, basically. So, this sect of Christianity that worships death instead of, life, isn't exactly unique in its formatting, let's put it that way, but it is very much a contrast, and the acts in which that take place in this song are not only fucking insane, but kind of set this weird precedent for the rest of the album to live up to this point, which I feel like it does despite never having such a bombastic plot of element take place. Now that I've ranted in full about that track, we can now move on to the next one, The Big Gloom, which is rather properly named given the soft riff pouring into quiet and distorted lyrics. The opening lines, sleeping in and out of an ice bath, no warmth, no life without it's too much, sounds like, you guessed it, dying in a bathtub. However, given what we talked about previously with the album cover, we know that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it's most likely talking about, you guessed it, Jean-Paul Marat, the French revolutionary who was confined to a bathtub. This was made much more clear with the lines, my arms, my legs are wood, unconscious trees, an ocean ringed with tile. I know that's not your style, but it certainly will be mine. The atmosphere of the track helps to convey how confining and depressing this state of existence must be, unable to really enjoy any aspect of life outside of merely existing because you are confined to a bathroom. Not only are bathrooms just boring, but they're meant to be temporary. You're not supposed to sit in one for hours on end, but he physically had to, so I can't imagine how much of a depressing state that must put someone in. The lines towards the end of the song, however, just open up your eyes, your dead ones, are most likely the perspective of the painter of the piece, Jacques Louis David, who is also a friend of Marat's. So it also adds the double effect of sounding depressing and being the perspective of the person who most likely would have found him dead in the tub. The entire track is depressing, it's gloomy, and it continues the ideas of the album of death and political unrest, which gets brought up much more later. Hunter is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album, not just from the instrumentation, but also the amount that it progresses the story. If you remember in Blood Hail, we were shooting arrows at God, and we apparently hit him and killed him. Well, we hit him, but we didn't kill him. This track opens with the lines of God dying on the forest floor, as we will get to now. Hunter, I'm laid out on the forest floor, arrows in my back and side. This is obviously God lamenting that he is dying, and then, in his final moments, he submits to the hunter. You can wear my skin as armor, you can eat my flesh and bone, leaving nothing that is needed. Now, that's depressing as is, but who is the hunter in this situation? The booklet isn't definitive, but it does give us some suggestions that people compared him to Adam and Lucifer, if not being an amalgamation of the two. Now, I'm not going to get into theory crafting on whether that's true or who I might think it is, because it doesn't really matter. The hunter is meant to be a representation of the greed and violence that humanity is capable of, and the track continues to showcase just how violent we are. The lines, teeth and hate end our relationship. Of course it's sad, but that's the way it is. Your violence always wins the day. Makes humanity all the more hateful and violent for this act, seemingly something done out of nothing more than petty disagreement. In the booklet, it talks about how God wanted to make the best world for humanity, and in doing so, he sided with the Antiochans, believing that maybe dying would be best for humanity. Obviously, there are some ramifications to that, but that doesn't happen until later, so for now, we're just eating his corpse, wearing his flesh. Normal shit you do, right? The instrumentation on this track is also something I really want to talk on because the first half builds layers of synth and drums, which all come to a head at the halfway point, letting the instrumentation float in this rather loose and disharmonious way. It works because of how well the story is conveyed here. It truly feels like a grand moment of despair where people are kind of just embracing their more animalistic side and going ape shit on God for kind of no reason. Like, the booklet describes it, sure, describes it in painful detail. It even refers to this as a feast, if I'm not mistaken. But there's no real need for this. If anything, they needed God to help them with the Romans. They just didn't give a shit. But anyways, I'm getting off track. The instrumentation pulls itself back together in the final leg of the track with guitar and string, with the repeated "the hunter does us all a great service and we've done so much to deserve it," which is such an ironic line for the song to end on. I'm so glad it does. Telephony is a hard track to pin down, especially in relation to the three that come before it. The opening synth prepares you for an interlude, then the drums come in and tell you, okay, maybe not, and then the riff right before the lyrics tell you, okay, definitely not. Lyrically, the song is obviously about time travel, with the opening lines, "If science is half the man it says it is, then I can build it, the machine that snaps all of time in half," painting a rather determined picture with the justification of, if I could just hear your voice, making it seemingly about loss and regret. However, this is made somewhat worrisome with the lines, "Is anybody there? All trembling and scared, replies then come faster than air." Fainter, sorry. That makes it sound like whatever experiment this was didn't go out as planned. This is compounded by the fact that the instrumentation throughout the entire track never changes, only just dissipating as the song continues, making it feel like someone truly got lost in time because they fucked with things they didn't understand. "Who Would Leave Their Son Out in the Sun" pairs two of the best things we've gotten on the album so far: acoustic guitars and religion. Again, the instrumentation is rather straightforward, with distant guitar strums paired with synths and ambient tones, painting this song in a fog of gloom, regret, and just overall despair. The lyrics of this track pair perfectly both with the title and the question at hand, as well as the production and instrumentation, with lines such as, "It's time that all these things I do, no matter what, become things of the past," and "I'm miserable whenever I think of it, and I think of it all the time," painting a rather dreary and hopeless scene. It only continues with the more we get into the track, with other lines such as, "What point is there in pushing on when all you push against is a brick wall? Everyone spends some time on the cross. I guess I just want to make sure it's not a total loss." If it wasn't clear from that last line, it does tell us exactly who the track is about. The Antiochans, our Christian sect we've been following this whole time. Remember, they think death is easier to achieve than a full, successful, satisfied life. So, getting up on a cross, putting your kid up on a cross, is, in their eyes, way easier than feeding them, bathing them, housing them, making sure they have an education, making sure they, grow up. That shit's difficult. That's work. That's effort. You've already killed God. What else do you need to do? Throw your kid on a cross. Obviously. The entire track is bathed in a level of ironic nihilism almost, because it proposes a question and then answers the question so brazenly that you're just left wondering, why did you ask in the first place? You knew the answer. It makes you feel stupid almost, and I kind of like that about it because it's not fucking around, it's finding out, and it wants you to as well. I'm gonna just script read this one. Thanks. "There Is No Food" is the final track of the first part of the album, and a good conclusion to this dark, eerie portion. Each track so far, in some way, is connecting to accepting death, if not wishing for it sooner. And so it makes sense that the final track of part one is not only a complete instrumental, but is the most full sounding song with layered guitars, some faint vocal sampling, and the most destructive bass hit, at least on this part of the album. It truly feels like someone accepting their final painful moments. This is a good time to bring back up the name of the part, the plow that broke the plains, because, well, we know what broke the plains. We know what the plains were. The plow, in this instance, is humanity, people, and the plains are God. We've stripped the land barren, in a sense, so to speak. And I like how the title not only works in the context of the theme and concept, but as well as just making sense. Like, once you know what they're talking about, everything falls in line very easily, and that's only more true for the second half of the album, which I'm dying to get into. The next track, Waiting for Black Metal Records to Come in the Mail, kicks off the second portion of the album titled The Future. Not only does it kick it off, but it kicks it off in an amazing way with a head-banging track, a strong juxtaposition to the first half. The first 2 minutes of the song consist of an ambient swirling before giving in to an abrasive and thudding drum line with a shredding riff and rather robust vocals, at least compared to the first half. The lyrics of this song are rather interesting as there are a lot of comparisons to the first half of the album as well as concepts that are getting more fleshed out now and will continue to from here. Lines such as "with their backs against the wall in these last days" obviously are the parallels being drawn, but we're now looking at it from the outside perspective, or at least that's what we're led to believe so far. Other lines such as "propel your national machines, giving us all the disease but not the vaccine" may sound like some QAnon shit, but that wasn't a thing in 2008. Instead, this is an actual condemnation of capitalism, society as a whole, saying that nations only use us as fuel, as cogs, but they never fix the actual issues, hence they give us the disease but not the vaccine. Other lines such as, "I guess I thought I'd feel something but I didn't, yes, that's a myth," most likely referring to the American dream and how it's very obviously a myth, and how people who believe in it quickly become disillusioned once they realize the reality of the situation where you're, usually just fending for yourself and everyone else is kind of just doing the same because it's not like anyone above you's giving a shit. The repeated "it's never gonna be good enough" as the song drones on feels like I don't know, a bubbling almost, like they're telling themselves it's never gonna be good enough, we're never gonna be good enough, the world's never gonna be good enough, only for a singular fuck right before the breakdown. It's just incredible. I really love this version of the song, even though I really like the demo version that released on the 2023 remaster titled Voids. You should go listen to that. This song is still fantastic, and it's easily one of my favorites from this album, which I know I'm going to say that a lot continuing, but keep in mind, it is a really good song. You should listen to it. You should listen to this whole album. If you're this far into the video, you probably already have, but still, I'm saying it, go do it. Holy fucking shit, 40,000 is both a reference to Terminator, the band themselves have made this clear, but also maybe Warhammer? I know that sounds like a weird reference, but trust me, if you know anything about Warhammer and you're watching this video, then there are some connections between the weird cult-like religion in that and the weird cult-like religion that this album follows. This is also a connection I'm going to be trying to make with this song, but do keep in mind, the band themselves have said this song is based off of Terminator, so anything I say here is mostly just theory for fun. I could be entirely wrong, and this song could genuinely just be about the movie Terminator. Before we get into any of the lyrics and my insane theory bullshit, the instrumentation is something worth talking about because of the xylophone sounding electronics and acoustic guitar, plus the fact that the vocals on this are probably the clearest on the entire album, which is hilarious given the fact that this song is either A, entirely inconsequential, or B, not that important even if it does relate to the main concept. Anyways, I'm going to be making connections that I have no basis for, because that's what YouTube is. You're welcome. The lines, "we're just machines that eat, breathe, and look really cool, you're reacting just the way I thought you would, and I've replaced my heart with metal parts," makes a few things clear from the jump. First off, this is not a literal one-for-one representation of Terminator, because as far as I know in Terminator lore, there may exclusively as robots. They aren't people with replaced parts. That's the thing newer movies start doing, I think, but no one gives a shit about those. The movies that this is referencing is when they're just robots. So this line is doing something different than the movies already, which I think gives my bullshit some credence. Continuing. The line, send me back in time and I'll bring us back in line, just tell me whose mother I have to kill, is very much about Terminator, but also could be about the Antiochans. Remember, they worship death. They think death is easier than life. So if they're going back to kill someone's mother, they're trying to make sure someone's not born, which would also be very useful in a religion where you worship death and you think death is much easier than life. Killing someone's mom makes that person not exist, which means that they're technically dead. The logic is somewhat there, albeit probably just Terminator. Continuing, we also have lines like, I'm fine like I've always been, and I don't remember when. My conscience wasn't acting up again. I'm working out just fine, but I can't get it to start. We're machines that breathe and weep. And that weeping part is why I think this is about the Antiochans, because it sounds like someone realizing they are no longer invested in this goal. They no longer want to do this, but they're already doing it. They're there. They can't escape it, which that is the plot of Terminator. Don't get me wrong. It's about a robot learning to love like a human does, but that it works for the concept of the album. I am stretching the entire theory here, but it works. It works. Anyways, continuing. The outro of the song is also one of the best moments on the album, as it's 3 minutes of banging drums, shredding guitar, vocal crooning, and just general groovy goodness. I wrote that. That's how you know it's groovy. When I wrote the word groovy, well, I didn't write it. I typed it, and then I printed it, and then I read it. You know I meant it. It's a good song. Go listen to it. We're continuing now. The Future is the third and final instrumental track of the album, with some nice beat boop electronics, some subwoofer level bass, nice drum kicks, and ambient tones, all coming together to make you think, that's nice and dark. However, that's not all, as the makings of a normal song begin to disperse and fade away into nothing as more disharmonious and chaotic noises take over, segueing perfectly into the next track. Now, I'm going to say this now, before we continue. Two things. First off, the last 3 songs on this album are all insanely good. Top 10 song material right here. I'm not lying. I genuinely think this. If you disagree, that's fine. Go write a hate-filled comment. You're already this far into the video, so you're dedicated to some degree. If you disagree with me, don't do the hate-filled thing. That was a joke, by the way. Satire. I like my comments nice and clean, even when people keep complaining about the audio, which I can't fix because I'm recording this on an iPhone from across the room and my computer's over there. So I don't know why I went on that tangent. Anyways, next song. Deep Deep is the first song on the 3-song run that is, like I said, probably one of the best in music, period. At least in my opinion. Again, go get mad about it in the comments. The song spends no time warming up, instead hitting the listener over the head with jagged drum lines, a bass line that sounds like it's dying, and a guitar riff that's so simple I could probably learn it in my sleep. The chorus only makes it better, layering it with this killer synth and letting all of it run together in this smooth and groovy way. A complete contrast to the rest of the album, and it works perfectly. The lyrics to this track, as well as the following two, are also very important, with lines such as, these atoms are liars, they do not realize and we cannot blame them, as they circle the floor, one just wants more, well they don't want any more. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the following verse after the chorus makes it a lot clearer. Does anyone feel guilty, like I did it all myself? One feels a lack of love, and there's no limit to the explosive power of this bomb. That's right, you guessed it. In 2008, they were writing simp songs about nuclear holocaust. I cannot tell you how fucking funny I find this shit. They managed to merge 2 concepts that have 0 connection to one another, and they went, yeah, love song about nuclear holocaust. That makes sense, duh. I love this album. It does things like that make no sense, and instead are just fun little thought experiments, and they work flawlessly in my opinion. This is only compounded by one of the best choruses of all time. We will sleep in these rivers, exalt the righteous and drown the sinners. Jesus Christ, why is love so lonely? Why is it? It's a line that just hits, especially when, like I said, it's paired with that killer riff and that thudding drum and that insane synth. It just leaves you with the question, why is it so lonely? Not only that, but it's asking Christ. In every depiction of Christianity, Christ is still the Savior, whether he's the actual Son of God or he's a relative of another higher entity. It's still Jesus that we are asking this question to, because he is still the Savior, and there is no answer. It's a nuclear bomb, dude. You're fucking dead. It doesn't matter what Christ thinks. Yeah, it's gonna be lonely. You're dead. Duh. Not only that, but the outro perfectly sets up the next track, and overall, the song just bangs on its own. Like, I can't explain enough in words how much I think this song works as a single, which is really funny given how much context is required for this song to make sense in context, but without it, you can just make it work. Long-time viewers, and by long time I mean people watching videos 2 months ago, know that I have a lot to say about the next track. In fact, I have so much that I'm going to read the most of this page verbatim on it, because I frankly don't want to misconstrue myself, and I've been speaking off the cuff so much already that I feel like it's deserved to read something entirely verbatim for once. If you aren't already aware, the next track is I Don't Love, which I have described as an industrial noise shoegaze track. Should tell you all you need to know about it, and if that doesn't, I'm not explaining musical subgenres to you today. That's a lot of work. Anyways, the opening seconds give us almost everything we need to know about the track, with distant war drums covering the soft vocals of I don't want to live like this, Lord, I don't want to live at all, I don't want to make this face anymore, but if I don't, that's all. This then drops into the insane wall of noise that makes up most of the track, which is just pure bliss. The thudding drums, barely audible riff, and general distortion make the lyrics hit even harder, especially seeing as the song is mostly just 2 sets of choruses. The second and proper chorus for the song is I don't love, I don't feel anything where this love should be. This tells us that it is actually a sequel to Deep Deep, but we've moved on from loving in isolation to total apathy, which explains the developing sound of gloom and regret bubbling over. Not only this, but I think it sets up the final track, but that's later. The line, I don't want to do this anymore, but there's enough to take, tells me that this isn't apocalyptic. It's just one of, if I'm assuming, many feelings of dread and loss. Whether this track and Deep Deep play into the Antiochian story is hard to tell, but the connection is there with the references to God, Lord, Jesus, and the lack or loss of emotion may be derived from the overabundance and normalization of death, so seeing it take place so commonly. This could also just be a reflection of the real world, where we see so many things televised and broadcasted to us that are just fucking awful, you know? Like TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitter, you know what I mean. If death is now seen as the norm and it's widely accepted and perhaps even sought after, then life has no meaning. Emotions become null and void, and they only simply stop once you die, so why cling to them? It's a dark, bleak, and intriguing way to interpret life and death, and the sound only makes it more interesting. Now for some personal time. When I wrote this script, I wrote it in about November, and I was having a bad time then because I was very worried about college, which I still am, but it's stressful trying to figure out where you're going to get tens of thousands of dollars, how you're going to make it through college, which has already been kind of rough and sounds like it is only going to get harder as you keep going. Shit's tough, but when I first listened to this album, I listened to it in 2021. I know, I haven't listened to this album for very long, but that's because I haven't cared about niche music shit for very long either. When I first heard this album, I just cried. But not the whole album. This song, specifically after the first line and then the wall of noise. If you've never listened to any emotionally exhausting songs while high and in the rain, I highly recommend you do so, because it unlocks a new understanding of the track. This isn't a song about wanting to die necessarily, but not wanting to feel that emptiness, not wanting to feel unloved or unlovable. It's honestly really relatable once you get down to the nitty gritty, but you have to kind of claw through a lot of very uncomfortable emotion to get to that point. And I think it's worth doing because this is a representation of the low. What happens when there is nothing beyond the veil of emptiness? And I like music that can convey such a complex emotional state so poignantly. The entire track is just that emotion, and it conveys it flawlessly, in my opinion. I've been at this for almost 2.5 hours now, so I'm sorry that I'm just going to conclude by reading off the script verbatim. I know that's kind of a easy, get out of jail free card for me, but genuinely, this album is a lot to talk about. This is a lot of information, and I've been retaining it to the best of my ability. But the last track is one that's very simple to break down, especially when reading verbatim, so I'm just going to do what's easiest in this scenario. Earth Mover is both a good follow-up to I Don't Love, as well as being a good finisher for the album. The entire song is about the Earth Movers, giants that are carved out of stone, made of earth, blood, and bone, that can knock mountains down, but were created to kill humans, which is evident with the line, reserved for human beings, its fingers on your throat, is pain that all things know. The sadistic irony of golems meant to wipe out humanity, most likely fueled by the religious fervor of the Antiochans, is that they don't die, so they simply say, "We wish we were dead." The instrumental is rather straightforward, half the track consisting of acoustics supporting the vocals, only to break down into this chaotic bliss after Dan slammed his bass guitar. That's actually what he did, according to an interview. He just fucking slammed the thing on the ground and they just kept it in the recording. Layering with banging drums, ambient tones, synths, a keyboard, and a guitar you barely even recognize. True shoegaze at its finest, in my opinion. And that's the music. We've covered it. I'm going to talk a bit about my own thoughts and my theories and all that, but that's the music. I love this album. To me, it is a 10. It is definitively one of the best post-punk, shoegaze, industrial, experimental, ambient albums out there. And if you disagree, you're just wrong. Well, what does the album mean? What's the point? Why make this overly depressing and gloomy project that seemingly does nothing other than make you sad? I think that's the point. I don't think this album exists for any other reason than to make you reflect on death, because the name of the album is Deathconsciousness. These songs all have to do with death in some capacity, and this album was made after Dan's father passed, or I think during the time of his passing. So the entire thing is drenched in death and the inevitability of it. And I think that's what it wants you to confront most, the sad reality that despite whatever religion you may believe in, despite whatever beliefs you may hold, death comes for us all eventually, and it's only through our learning to live with that fact that we can enjoy things in a meaningful capacity that may persist after we do. It's an interesting way to get to a philosophy that I find very intriguing, but the way in which the album does so is through pure emotion. The logic doesn't matter. The logic, in fact, is completely reversed. It tells you that death is the only goal, that death is the thing to strive for, but it's so fucking sad that you know that's not true. It's so depressing that you can't possibly look at it and go, this is the way you're supposed to live. No, if anything, it causes a guttural reaction to go, oh, what the fuck? No. And that's what I love about it, is that it conveys all of these emotions from that perspective perfectly. If there was an argument to be made for why death is a better thing than life, this album is the proof that you can make the argument. But it's also advocating against it very clearly. It's making the Antiochans out to be sadistic murderers who kill their children and eat God. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't an album of good people, but it's conveyed in such a way that makes you understand why they would think that. not only this, but the guys in the band, at least one of them, if I'm not mistaken, is also from Guile Corey. If you know what that album is, then this entire album makes a lot more sense immediately off the bat. I didn't know what that band was or what the album was until more recently, and yeah, I can confidently say that they basically just took that, or took this, and then made that. So, yeah. Those are my thoughts. That's my opinion. That's the review. Check out the Instagram for when I post more dumb shit about things I'm going to cover. Next is probably Kendrick Lamar and why Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is a 10 out of 10. Good night. Have a great day.